All right, trying this again. My last one misfired, so it's Dave Dickinson, astroguys.com from Morocco. I am kind of doing this as a test to see if my internet connection here at our Airbnb is stable enough to support doing video. Hey, Curry the Vegan's back. I've got one dedicated viewer that comes back. Let me know how this connection is, how the sound and video, because I'm coming from Morocco over here. Trying to do this right before we do the weekly space hangout at the top of the hour, and that will be another challenge to do. I have not done one. I did a couple from Spain. I have not done one here from Morocco yet, so this is the first test. The Wi-Fi seems pretty stable. Our Wi-Fi is kind of pay-as-you-go. I think we're knocking up against our 12 gig probably. It seems like every 3 days we blow through it, so we'll see if we need to actually, hopefully it doesn't tank here in the middle of things. This week, what I want to talk about mostly is, you'll probably hear, I've got the windows closed, but you'll probably hear some, oh cool, good so far, thanks, T-Vin Scotter, that took a look at that. Probably hear kids screaming in the background. It is Ramadan here, and we are right up against sunset in probably about another 30 minutes, which means everybody will be breaking fast. And it's kind of an interesting time, actually, to be over here and to go out after sunset because everybody's out walking the streets, all the street vendors are out. It's kind of like a big party every night. Now, during the day when you go out, everything is totally dead here because everybody stays up and eats some more and tries to tank up so they can fast all day. So it's an interesting time to be in Morocco, actually. So anyway, talking about space, this week I had two main things that were on my mind. One, I wrote for Sky and Telescope about LISA Pathfinder, that they've actually got the first science results back, and LISA Pathfinder is exceeding expectations right now. So that's kind of cool. And it's actually getting down into, they wanted to get down into the picometer scale, which was a millionth of a millionth, like a billionth of a meter in scale. And they actually got down into the femtometer scale, which is like around the range of the charge radius diameter of a proton. LISA Pathfinder is a test mission that's testing a full-scale laser interferometer for detection gravitational waves in space. Now, LISA Pathfinder will not detect gravitational waves. LISA Pathfinder does not have the capability. It doesn't have the baseline. It's like shrinking down a 1,000,000-kilometer long baseline that they want to do with these 3 spacecraft flying in a triangular formation around the sun into the inside vacuum chamber of LISA Pathfinder, which is like 30 centimeters across. But what they're trying to show is that they can put these 2 tiny platinum gold test masses in a very gravitationally quiet place, so they're not being vibrated, they're not being on Earth. Laser interferometer like LIGO that detected gravitational waves, they have to account for earthquakes, traffic, people walking by, everything. The kind of vibrations they're looking for are so tiny from these gravitational waves that they have to account for and cancel all these out. What we'd really like to do in the next generation phase past LIGO is put a gravitational wave detector in space where it is in 0G. There's nothing disturbing it. These things are flying in formation. LISA Pathfinder has been an off and on thing. NASA was involved with the mission in the early test phases around 2007, 2008, in the early proposal phases. NASA backed out when around 2011, back in the lean years when they had to make some tough decisions for budget cuts. So ESA, the European Space Agency, decided to just go this alone, to do this LISA Pathfinder mission. And to eventually do, it's going to be in an order of magnitude about maybe 20 years from now, if we're still periscoping and weekly space hangouting, we'll be talking about the full-scale LISA mission when it finally launches. I'm seeing 2034. Unfortunately, that's like way down the road, but it's kind of cool that they're even kind of doing this. So LISA Pathfinder exceeded expectations. Yay, gravitational wave astronomy in space. That was mostly what most of my brain was focused toward this Tuesday and Wednesday. My article is up on Sky and Telescope on this. It's they didn't detect gravity. It's interesting in a way that they went down. If you saw the graph, and I put it in the article, that they exceeded by about a factor of 5 what they were hoping to do for this mission. So the question is out there, and I actually did pose the question during the conference, and they gave me an interesting answer. If LISA Pathfinder would be able to find a direction from gravitational waves in space. Remember LIGO, they had the detection, but they could only kind of pin it down to a rough patch of sky. The Scottish engineer that was talking there, seems to think they'll be able to pin it down within 1 arc minute. LISA Pathfinder is, think of a triangle formed by 3 spacecraft that's 1 million kilometers on a side. There's going to be a very long baseline for interferometry, measuring the distance between these at very, very precise moments for these test masses that are inside the spacecraft. So it's looking like 1 arc minute is 1/30th the diameter of a full moon. So they'll be able to pin down pretty closely. There was some discussion, I know, of the LIGO detection that occurred a few months ago. Actually occurred back in September, and they just made the news announcement of it this few months ago. That Fermi, I believe it was, detected a gamma ray burst within less than a second of that same time. So there was they were thinking that maybe this gamma ray detection was related to this gravitational wave burst of these stellar mass suns merging, black holes merging together. So LISA will be able to get a directionality in the sky on its own. So that's kind of cool. The other thing I wrote was kind of a fun piece with the moon going toward first quarter on Universe Today about hunting lunar letters. Now we had looked and we'd written about hunting. These are features that look like letters from our alphabet. Now there's no shortage of O's, of course, because most craters look like O's. There's some ridges that look like I's. What we've been trying to do over the last few years is fill in the lunar alphabet, kind of like what they did on Galaxy Zoo, where they had these galaxies that people could write their names in just from the positions of them and things like that. There is a famous feature known as the Lunar X, and Sunday night you'll be able to hunt for the Lunar X, known as the Purbach Cross in the Lunar Highlands. It's interesting to see. I've seen it many, many times. If you catch it, it's usually right after first quarter, and if you catch it when it's illuminated just right, it looks kind of cool because the X part of the terminator, this is actually the confluence of a bunch of crater ridges together that makes this little X pattern, but it's kind of neat to look along the dark limb of the moon, and then you're like, hey, there's like an X just floated, glowing out there in the dark. That's the Lunar X, the Purbach Cross. Sunday night would be a good time to see that. Another feature in the Mare Nubium, north of that sometimes is visible at the same time. Wendy Clark, an amateur astronomer on Universe Today's Flickr forum, actually had the Lunar X and Lunar V in the same image, which is kind of cool. There are some lesser known ones. There's some I didn't know about. Charles Wood on the Moon Wiki Spaces page has a partial list of lunar letters in his addendum. That's like, there's the one he didn't have that me and Blobrana, another person on Twitter, were talking about, was the Lunar S. I'd never seen this one, but Blobrana had a picture of the Lunar S. The Lunar Q, I had never seen that. So go ahead and go over there and check that out on Universe Today. That was kind of a fun article. Next week's article, we're going to be writing about the opposition of Pluto. This will be the first opposition after New Horizons flyby next year. So if you're up for a challenge and you have a big light bucket and you're up for actually looking to see where Pluto is in the sky, we're going to be talking about that. Here in Morocco, we've been really in 2 locations right now, in Tangier, and now we're in a little seaside city with a nice walled little Medina that's actually kind of nice to go walk around, called Asila. And we've done a little bit of astronomy. We've been watching some of the International Space Station passes. We don't really have a balcony here. I did bring, of course, my binoculars. I always travel with these. And I did bring my DSLR and our tripod, of course, so we can at least do some wide field astrophotography. We actually had an interesting view of the conjunction of Mercury and the crescent moon a few days ago. Oh, cool. Somebody shared, Curry the Vegan shared on Twitter. That's kind of neat. That we went down to the Medina early that morning and actually got the image. And I actually had some foreground in it too, so it was one of the cooler shots we've done here in Morocco thus far. Corey Schmitz down in South Africa actually got a picture of Mercury near the crescent moon. We were discussing this after I took my image because he was in the occultation path. Here in Morocco, we were just outside of it. So we were discussing that. And I've also been discussing with Jeff Notkin of Meteorite Men fame possibly where in Morocco one might buy a meteorite and where these kind of meteorite markets exist, just to write about these things. I know they go out in the Sahara Desert and find meteors out here. We were talking about a few cities he knows of, and because I know he's on the meteorite scene and in the beat, in the market, and what's going on. So we're hoping to get out in the country a little more, in the mountains. Rabat's probably our next stop in about a week or two. Asila's been nice. It's getting time to move on. I'll give the 1 minute warning here because I have to start getting ready for the weekly space hangout. But if anybody out there has any questions about space, astronomy, Morocco, life, the universe, anything, whatever's going on out there, Periscope, I'll tell you what I know and what I've learned. I'll just give that 1 minute warning out there before we shut down. Looks like we had a fair amount of followers. Looks like the video hung on through the house Wi-Fi here. We're on pay-as-you-go Wi-Fi, so it's every 3 or 4 days I have to go down to the local office here and give them 100 dirhams to give me another 12 gigabytes. So it's I think we're coming up on our 12 gigabyte limit tomorrow. So all right. That seems like we have some followers dropping off, and I've got to get ready for the weekly space hangout. Top of the hour. Don't miss it. We'll be there, Wi-Fi willing.